Top of the morning. Today we are going to be looking at a discography that I'm sure you've heard of unless you live under a rock. Kendrick Lamar. Kendrick Lamar is an American rapper, songwriter, and producer from Compton, California that makes modern hip-hop songs with heavy inspiration/influence from genres such as R&B, jazz, soul, and funk. These combinations of influences make Kendrick Lamar's instrumentals and songs as a whole incredibly groovy with unique progressions and song structures that makes Kendrick really stand out in a never-ending sea of SoundCloud rappers. In my opinion, Kendrick is one of the best to ever do it. And honestly, in years to come, much of his work will be studied as classics. His skill, his technicality, and his musicianship are pretty much unmatched. What I especially love about Kendrick is his lyricism, where he touches upon incredibly heavy and important discussion points such as police brutality, gang violence, and sexism. His music brings so much awareness to these issues, and he uses his music almost as a form of activism, showing the world has problems that he believes needs to be addressed. He has such a unique approach to music production, and his artistry knows no bounds. So, as usual, we're going to be looking at only his full-length studio LPs. So, getting started, we're going to take a look at Section 80. Section 80 was released in 2011 and quickly garnered eyes from casual listeners and critics alike. The album established Kendrick's style and put him even more on the map in the music industry. This album feels incredibly purposeful, with lyrics spanning across a variety of issues, including racism, the war on drugs, and the problems of the Ronald Reagan era. Though what I especially like about this album is the production. Everything in each track is layered so intricately and creates these open and vast soundscapes that really allow the listener to get engrossed within the work. The atmosphere is certainly more laid back as well, with the unique use of instrumentation and obvious jazz influences to create a smooth and more ethereal style of rap, heavily contrasting that of what was popular in hip-hop at the time. It's hard to look at this album outside of the scope of Kendrick's discography, as his other works certainly show his progression as a musician, and comparatively this work feels a bit less consistent, with an evident lack of focus at times. Also, at times the production can feel a bit muddy, and that's kind of a minor kind of nitpicky detail. It's rarely a problem, but I notice it sometimes. This album as a debut LP, though, is nothing to scoff at and really shows the beginning of Kendrick trying to find his voice and his style, and succeeding heavily. I personally rate this album an 8 out of 10, with some of my favorite tracks being ADHD, Tammy Song, and Rigor Mortis. Up next is Good Kid, Mad City, which was released in 2012. This album showed a lot more influence of older hip-hop with obvious influences to popular West Coast rap works, especially that of the legendary rapper Tupac. This album is a concept album illustrating a young Kendrick Lamar growing up in Compton and his childhood struggles of drugs and gang violence. This album is dark and gritty, with an emphasis on the production matching the thematic elements of the lyrics, and it's executed brilliant. Additionally, this album showed a lot more of Kendrick's technicality as a musician and rapper, with a variety of unique flows and even certain vocal inflections that are features that add tremendously to the composition of this work. Speaking of flows, this album flows tremendously well. Transitions between songs are seamless, and even within songs there could be a sudden instrumental change that changes the vibe pretty much completely, but it never feels forced. Everything in this album feels intentional and masterful. Additionally, all of the features presented on this album do nothing but add to the value of this album, which can be pretty hard to come by in some rap albums. This album honestly has some of the best features that Kendrick has ever had. Long story short, this album is incredibly successful at what it attempts to portray, and nearly every aspect of this album is perfect to me. This is a 10 out of 10 album for me, and my personal favorite songs are Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe, Money Trees, and Mad City. Up next is To Pimp A Butterfly, released in 2015. This album is widely considered Kendrick's most influential and inspired album among listeners and critics alike, and listening to it, it's clear to see why. This album is a masterclass in directed storytelling and how to write a concept album. Everything that I love about Kendrick's ability to encapsulate a listener and portray these complex, emotional, and lyrical themes is pushed to the limit on this project. Technicality-wise, Kendrick is at his peak. Every word and every musical choice on this album feels purposeful and deliberate. But what is so incredible about this album to me is its progressive nature in the hip-hop genre. The influences on this album are incredibly diverse, from soul to R&B to jazz to funk, and Kendrick captures all the beauty and nuance of these incredibly different genres masterfully to create an album that will surely be considered a classic of our generation years to come. There really isn't anything negative I had to say about this album, so this is a 10 out of 10 album for me, with my favorite songs being The Black's the Berry, King Kunta, and Alright. After that, we have Damn, released in 2017. This is certainly a bit of an outlier in the scope of Kendrick's previous work, with him abandoning the highly conceptual nature of his previous works and creating a more traditional style hip-hop album, which is not inherently a bad thing. However, it does lend itself to causing this album to feel a bit undirected and a bit more inconsistent compared to his previous works. Compared to his previous works, it's clear that some songs feel almost somewhat filler, without that concrete direction that is so evident on previous works. All things considered, though, it is easy to be critical of a work when Kendrick's previous two albums are essentially masterpieces. This is still an incredibly solid album with great production and instrumentals, and Kendrick showing off some of his best flows to date with an energy that is hard to come by even with his previous works. The time of its release as well is evident, with its production showcasing a more bass-heavy and assertive production, showcasing what was already around and what would be to come with the modern trap-heavy nature of hip-hop in the modern era. This album feels more like a reflection of Kendrick's career and his personal growth as an artist, which can lead itself to being a bit showboaty at times, but other times showing a level of introspection and reflectiveness that shows his artistic progression beautifully. Despite my problems with this record, I still overall quite enjoy it, and outside the scope of Kendrick as a whole, I do believe it is a solid rap album. I give this album a 6 out of 10, with my favorite songs being DNA, Fear, and XXX. Now it's time we go through a listening order for all these amazing records. In my personal opinion, the listening order of Kendrick's studio LPs is to start with Good Kid, Mad City. I believe this album captures everything what makes Kendrick a unique artist, and encapsulates the scope of pretty much his entire discography, with all the lyrical, conceptual, and musical nuances that come with it. Next, I see a bit of a branch between To Pimp a Butterfly, if you enjoy Kendrick's more conceptual and progressive style music and enjoy his diverse range of influences, and between Section 80, if you're looking for a more traditional rap album with incredible production and instrumentals. Lastly, I would recommend Damn. While it is certainly the weakest of his works, there's still value to be found, and if you already enjoy all his previous works, there's certainly something for you to discover. So, that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I changed a few things on the format of this series, such as including my personal ratings on albums, which I hope is received well, as it was something that was requested by a few people for me to look into incorporating. Additionally, I'm planning on starting up live streams over on my Twitch, where I'll be doing live review and analysis of music recommended by my viewers. So if that's something that sounds interesting to you, drop a follow on that, or follow my Twitter to know when I go live. I figured this would be a good way to go over artists that I don't feel like making a whole video on, but are still requested by you guys, so I can at least have that form of fan interaction. But even so, leave a comment of any artist you want me to cover next, and subscribe if you like this content and want to see more. Take care, guys, and thanks for watching.